To All the Boys I Loved Before is a teen drama, book, or movie, depending on which medium one appreciates more. Due to having an attention span of a 2-year-old, I delved into the latter, which was released as a Netflix special. The movie encapsulates the life of a typical high schooler, Lara Jean, someone who achieves good grades, diving into the beautiful world of love, contrasted by the chaotic and unconventional way in which she got herself into it in the first place. Before immersing ourselves into the impeccable plot of this movie, it is imperative to take a look at some of the characters. Lara Jean is an introvert with hopes similar to finding love on Tinder, nothing but mere fancies. Her love for 5 individuals expounds on the fickleness of love, crushing the integrity of monogamy at every rudimentary level, and that is actually not what the show is about. So Lara Jean, the protagonist, writes letters to each of her crushes as a cathartic mean to articulate her feelings for them. It's important to know that the disquisitions found in the letters are not meant for any of her crushes to view, otherwise the target audience of the show will be geared towards a totally creepier fan base. Anyways, Lara Jean's whole persona is established to be a low-profile shadow, which makes her the perfect candidate for Batman. Josh, as explained by an exposition presented in the first act through Lara's interior monologue, is Lara's first boyfriend, where the boy and the friend have a space traditionally coined as betrothed to sister. Apparently to Josh, pee in Mountain Dew supersedes plain water, and this level of dedication is truly emblematic of the unwavering support for industrialization and the overall progress for human development. Yet, under the influence of love, he decides to make the rational choice of choosing water, subtly reinforcing love's potency. Imagine if they got married. He might even have chosen filtered water while being unsponsored. Beyond that, all we know that Josh is conventionally good looking and is supposedly a great guy under the behest of the movie. One important takeaway from Josh is to never date your best friend's sister, otherwise your script gets heavily limited to, hey, can we talk? And getting denied in every other possible way. Peter Kavinsky, your typical high school jock who has a caring side that delineates him more of a Mary Sue rather than someone you actually deplore. Even though his greatest flaw is dating the arch nemesis of the protagonist, Genevieve, we are taught that the person you are with doesn't define you but acts as a constant reminder that good looks surmount all character imperfections. Lara used to be best friends with Jen, short for Genevieve, but the last time I checked, she was best friends with Josh, and superlative is defined as the highest degree of something, which means either Lara had 2 good friends or is an unreliable narrator. Beyond this point, there will be spoilers. So, we are introduced to the lovely Kavi family consisting of Lara, her father Dr. Kavi, her older sister Margot, and her younger sister Kitty, where we get to see the cordial relationship between each family member and Josh. During dinner, light badinage transitions into heavy heartbreaks when Margot decides to break up with Josh as she moves to Scotland to further her education. The cause of the breakup was due to Margot's late mother's advice on never going to college with her boyfriend, even though she's clearly just a messenger for Jenny Han. A tragic outcome for a couple, but a perfect opportunity for Lara, even though the last time I checked the handbook, dating one's sister's ex is in violation of the ethics code termed awkward Thanksgiving. This exposition equips the audience with the basic inner workings of each character and how they are wired. The struggle between familiar love and romanticism invokes a strong concept of sacrifice that questions the extent of altruism. Evidently, Lara has enough self-respect not to swoop in for a cheeky wide-open layup despite Margot being obviously benched from the match. This dilemma is constantly reminded via Lara's unbridled imaginations fueled by her suppressed emotions and a part of herself that willfully believes that Josh and her may be an item. By letting the audience view the entire situation through her lens gives the movie the flair it needs to spice up the plot and really put into perspective the level of cringe her letters were. Margot's adage states that when something is of no value, you either donate it, recycle, or throw it away, which draws parallel to the situation she landed Josh in. The Kavi family then sends Margot off because, as we were once told by Margot, to throw something of no use away. On Lara's first day of school as a 6th grader, we are introduced to the aforementioned characters who will propagate the plot forward. Call me a fool because turns out Lara Jean has another best friend, Christine. I guess the disregard for the sanctity of the English language is apparent. During lunch, Jan acted as a character foil to Lara by being the charming, charismatic individual surrounded by an assembly of friends, while Lara looks around the cafeteria awkwardly, upscaling her level of misfit, which never really happens in reality unless you're a complete dick of a person or a complete weirdo who enjoys drinking urinated Mountain Dew. Appearing lost and alienated at the cafeteria to portray the lack of popularity is the classic paralinguistic feature that detracts any ounce of creativity, and a trope so uninspiring even Dragon Ball Evolution decides to leave it out of their script. However, this scene does redeem itself later on in the movie when the cafeteria was reused to assert Lara's increased popularity. As a way to extricate herself from the lack of friends to join her for lunch, her ingenuity led her to change her dining venue to the library, as everyone is well aware that the library has always shown a casual indifference about ants foraging every piece of woodwork that exists in that place of solace. As we see Lara driving Kitty back home, she almost reverses into Peter Kavinsky. Embarrassed by her complete incompetency in handling the machinery refined in the late 20th century, she apologized and admitted that she wasn't comfortable with handling her mirrors, because the only thing the mirrors reflected were her erroneous driving. This is the first time we witness the unadulterated version of Kavinsky, as the influence of Jan is strictly restricted by geographical proximity and can only be summoned under the command of concentrated jealousy. This quirky interaction sets up the foundational rapport between the two main casts, forging the unintentional bond that ensues. One fine gym class, Lara was having a light jog when suddenly Peter Kavinsky approaches her with the letter of confession, tantamount to having an affidavit, enough to subpoena her to attend the Cupid High Court. She decides to use feint, but due to a typo in the script, the E was replaced with an A, and she collapses in the middle of the track, alarming no one else but Peter, evidently showing a lucid flaw in the school's student welfare department. As Lara gains consciousness, she sees Josh striding towards her with one of her letters in his hand and panics. In the face of danger, Lara pinned down Peter Kavinsky and kissed him in front of Josh, but surprisingly did not get into trouble with the law. This really helps her case in corroborating that she was not trying to get together with Kavinsky, as kissing is a purely platonic act every friend practices on a scheduled basis. This scene worsens the struggles Lara faced by converting her imaginary problems into reality. The kiss is an escapist solution for the crisis Lara Jean is mired in, but instead of resolving the problem at hand, it brings her deeper into the quagmire. She explained to Kavinsky that she used the kiss as a form of gesticulation to prove to Josh that she had zero feelings for him. Upon explaining her predicament, Kavinsky admitted that he and Jen recently broke up, and using his whole snafu as leverage, he convinced Lara to date him under pretense. This patently obvious setup is definitely leading down the path of them discombobulating pretense with reality, otherwise it wouldn't have been a movie but rather a wedding documentary. Despite being equipped with such knowledge, the chemistry and character building between Lara and Kavinsky is compelling enough for the audience to appreciate them as a couple. Tugging at the heartstrings of the audience, the performance allows us to believe that their relationship is slightly more real than Titania and Nick Bottom's in A Midsummer Night's Dream. The effect of their relationship becomes ineffable in school, removing the cloak of invisibility off of Lara, crushing any chances of her becoming part of the League of Shadows. As their relationship solidifies within the school, Lara goes for parties with Kavinsky, keeping up her end of the bargain on the deal they made in the beginning. For the first time, Lara Jean changed and became more outgoing, removing any remnants of her past identity. The change in her character may deviate from the typical Disney be-yourself script, but it shines an alternative perspective that maybe changing can widen one's horizon. The whole build-up for the relationship between these two individuals climaxes at a ski trip, as aforementioned during the contract-making scene. Culminating at a ski trip, the heavily invested feelings between Lara and Kavinsky were put to the test, and the syllabus included, is it a good idea to visit my ex's room? Tricky as it may seem, the answer actually ranges under the spectrum of no's. It may vary in tone, but definition stays cemented. However, our dear Kavinsky tripped over twice on a flat, undisturbed ground, riding a tricycle with 2 extra training wheels, and still found himself in Jan's room. It's as though he wants to fail. After the trip, Jan, being the quintessential jealous ex-girlfriend, contumeliously rubs it at Lara about Kavinsky visiting her room the previous night, and mentioned that Kavinsky gave her Lara's favourite scrunchie even though she snatched it from him at a party prior. The reasons for her character's unlikability pile up throughout the movie, and her actions are consistent with her persona, which is why, as a villain, her simplistic objective has been achieved. Empathizing with her actions is near impossible because it stems from jealousy. Her character creates an alternative construct of what Lara could have become if she were to let this untethered feeling manifest within her. Therefore, we can conclude that expressing your feelings in any innocuous form, regardless of the level of cringe, is better than keeping them repressed. When confronted on a tempestuous situation by Lara, Kavinsky refuted with, "You don't understand," which arguably isn't the best defense against what you doing in your ex's room last night. He might as well have said that he went to her room to seek shelter from the rain, because at least there's a purpose. However, what we can agree on is this whole sequence of events ripples from the crux of an inconsequential decision made by 2 teenagers who couldn't differentiate reality from Taylor Swift's songs. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. Undeniably, the movie is cheesy, but it does contain a lot of heart. It captures romantic fantasy every high schooler wishes for, and at its most elementary level, the idea of finding love in the most unexpected scenarios. Despite the fact that anything like that sprouting in anyone's mundane and well-scripted life is statistically improbable, one can only hope with the advent of new dating apps.